It is time for us to bring in Arthur Schwartz, the food maven. Arthur joins us on a Monday morning. We talk food. And, of course, you can hear this show rebroadcast on the weekends and also during our 12 noon block. And, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring in Arthur. Good morning, Arthur.
Good morning. And I understand you're not feeling so well this morning either.
Yeah, Arthur and I were comparing ailments.
Well, does the audience know that you have an abscess that you're dealing with this morning?
Yeah, they do, because the voice is a little ragged and stuff like that. So they know that.
Marshall woke up, being able to talk but not eat, and then I woke up the same way. I can talk, here I am, but I ate something yesterday that did not agree with me. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I keep thinking of my grandfather's dictum, is that you never eat pork in August.
Okay.
Now, I don't know where that came from, but my grandfather was a cook / actually chef at one point in his life. He did have various food businesses over the course of his life. At the end of his life, he was a nasty old waiter at the Jewish dairy restaurant called The Famous. I'm not sure he was so nasty to the customers, but he complained about them a lot. And he certainly wasn't the nicest grandpa I had. But he was a very, very good cook. And I did, for many years, follow his advice of never eating pork in August. But then, then New York got barbecue.
That's right. There you go.
I don't know. So I did eat pork yesterday. I had a Cuban sandwich at a Mexican restaurant. That was a huge mistake, but I was in a mood, and I don't know. We went to this place mainly because they have cheap margaritas, and I needed that, and it was cool. We walked out of 2 different restaurants yesterday because it wasn't cool, and feeling like it was 90-something degrees, and today probably closer to 100, I need a little bit of cool. Anyway, I won't get it this morning because as soon as I get off the air, I have to cook the food that I bought yesterday before I got sick. Went to the supermarket in the morning, and actually, I confess, it was Whole Foods, and I've been wanting to try Whole Foods pork Italian-style sausage. They're enormous. That's already my first complaint about them, but they do look succulent. We'll tell you next week how they were, but I couldn't resist, so I bought a few. And to go with that, I bought some broccoli that was so good when I bought broccoli last week at Whole Foods, and also so cheap that, believe it or not, it was like $1.29 a pound for just the broccoli crowns, as they call the top parts, but enough stem to suit me. I like stem. Anyway, they were in great shape. I bought that. So these things have to be cooked today. My grandfather said, don't eat pork in August because pork spoils very quickly, but I think also in those days existed trichinosis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The irony, of course, is that he ended his career in a kosher dairy restaurant where they didn't serve any meat, much less pork. So I'm going to make, I originally was going to cook these sausage with a head of cabbage that I have in the fridge. Now, I must say, cabbage to me is a winter vegetable, but at the farmer's market, there were fresh heads of beautiful Savoy cabbage, and I just couldn't resist even just for looking at them. So I bought one, and I really would like to cook it sooner rather than later, but, cabbage will keep in the refrigerator for at least a couple weeks, I would say. You may have to take out some outside leaves, but usually you're cool for at least a week. I'm going to cook the broccoli, and on days like this when it's so hot, I realize that steaming isn't just for good nutrition. It's also for less heat. You put a small amount of water in your pot. I have those. I don't know what you use to steam. I know you do that, Marshall. But I have two collapsible. I don't even know what you call them, but you know which one I mean. They fan out
Yep.
and fit the size of the pot. And I have a big one for big pot and a smaller one for a small pot or a small amount of whatever I'm steaming. And I put that, maybe, not even an inch of water, and takes no time on high heat to get an inch of water or less to boil and steam. And I don't even wait for that to happen. I really want to make this fast and keep the stove on as little as possible. So I put the prepped broccoli, meaning washed and cut up, into medium-sized flowerlets, we'll call them, not tiny pieces, and put that in my steamer and turn on the heat. And 10 minutes later, it's done. It's fully cooked. If you like it a little firm, then take it out now and put it in a bowl. If you like it a little bit more well done, you can just leave it in the pot for a few, over the steaming water just for a few more minutes, not on the heat, and that'll cook it a little further. This goes, by the way, for any vegetable in the steamer. And I find the broccoli takes really 10 minutes, maybe 8 minutes if you like very firm broccoli. Remember, you're starting it off in cold water with the heat turned on only after you put the vegetable in. And we like that, not just at room temperature, but even cold, dressed with olive oil, my best olive oil, and lemon juice, not vinegar. I mean, you could use vinegar if you love vinegar, but we prefer lemon juice. So it's gentler, and it brings out the broccoli flavor.
I was going to say,
now, I must say the Whole Foods broccoli was so good last week. I'm thinking this is the same broccoli. I didn't dress it at all. I tasted it when it came out of the pot, and it was so sensational. I'm not joking. It was like candy. It was so sweet. That's a joke. It wasn't like candy, but it was very sweet. That I didn't put anything on it. But today we're gonna eat it later as a salad. So maybe I'll open a can of tuna fish to go with it. But I do have tomatoes. You don't have to put the fire on for that. We can have sliced tomatoes and the broccoli and sausage. And now I got to decide what to do with the sausage. There's a recipe in my last cookbook, the Southern Italian Table. I do believe it's in there, for potatoes with cabbage and pancetta and hot pepper, because it's a recipe from Basilicata, and Basilicata, like Calabria, loves hot pepper. I make this all the time these days, but not necessarily with pancetta and not so much hot pepper. But the technique of the potatoes and cabbage, I find, is very adaptable. For instance, if you want to put in, if you wanted to put in an herb, you could put in an herb. But what was I going to say? If you wanted to put in, if you want to put in onion. Onion is very good, and the technique is simple. Let's say you're going to use onion. Saute an onion, cut thinly sliced, or chopped, either way. And as soon as it gets a little tender, like maybe 4 or 5 minutes, in your good olive oil, add your potato. I use like 1 medium potato per person. This is not I don't know what the book says, and I'm not looking at it. But this is something I just make, and I eyeball. And I would say 1 medium potato, 1 5-6 ounce potato per person. And I use those very thin-skinned white potatoes. I just have to wash them. I don't even bother peeling them. And I cut them into thick slices. Now, what I usually do is I cut the potato in half lengthwise and then cut it into a thick slice. So you really got chunky chunks. And you put them in the pan with the onion and the oil and toss them around for 2 or 3 minutes so that they absorb some of the oil and they start cooking. This is over, I would say, medium heat. And then add your cabbage, which you could either cut into more or less, squares or cubes. The leaves fall into squares, or shredded. Doesn't have to be too thin. Pretty much you can cut the cabbage any way you like. I would say a half of a 3-pound head of cabbage for 2 medium potatoes. And that's enough to serve Bob and me or 3 other people, maybe even 4 other people. But I would, if you're doing 1 medium potato per person, that's 2 people. So you put the cabbage on top and add, and now if you've just rinsed it, then you can just put the wet cabbage, drained of course, but still clinging with water, on top of the potatoes. And but if you don't have wet cabbage, then add, let's say, 3 tablespoons of water, and cover the pot, and over medium-low heat, let the potatoes and the cabbage cook like that in the 2 layers for, 10 minutes or so. Then, carefully, because we don't want to break up the potatoes quite yet, and they're going to be partially cooked, toss this all around all together so that the potatoes are now mixed with the cabbage. Now, if I was doing this according to the recipe in my book, I would have cooked out some pancetta first, or even guanciale. I'm into guanciale lately. Guanciale is cheek meat, cured pork cheek, and it's much more gelatinous a cut than pancetta, which is basically bacon. Bacon, of course, comes from the chest. Guanciale comes from the cheek, and it needs to be. It's more fat too, usually. It depends on the pancetta. Some pancetta is almost all fat. Guanciale needs to be cooked out a little bit more slowly, I find, than pancetta. But in this case, you're going to cook it in some liquid as well, because the cabbage will create a lot of its own juices. It's not just going to be the water clinging or the 3 tablespoons that you've added. The cabbage itself is basically all water. And as it cooks, it releases a lot of those sweet cabbage juices, which mingle with the potato and the olive oil and the onion. You could do this with garlic instead of onion. Why not? And as I said in the recipe, as it appears in Southern Italian Table, I do believe there's a good pinch or more, probably more, of hot red pepper flakes. This can be a very spicy dish if you want to. And by the way, salt. I forgot to mention potatoes and cabbage, I think, are sponges for salt. So when you put the cabbage in, also sprinkle the top with, a teaspoon for 2 potatoes and a half a head of cabbage, a teaspoon of salt. My salt is sort of saltier than most salt. It's salt from Sicily that I buy at my butcher's shop. I can buy it anywhere, actually, but it's very cheap at my butcher. And it's the same salt. It's called S-O salt. And it's the same salt I buy when I'm in Sicily. So here it is in Brooklyn. I'm sure it's everywhere. So the sausage that I have will go great with cabbage and potatoes, but I think we're just going to have it with broccoli, and we have very good bread, so I don't think we need a potato.
It's funny you talk about cabbage. Growing up as a kid, my grandmother, the way she would cook, as kids, we loved cabbage. Because it was in just about every dish she made.
Well, which grandmother? What ethnicity was this grandmother?
Oh, she from like Hungary, Roman.
Hungarians, yeah. I'm sure I've said this a million times, but among Eastern European Jews, the women always used to say the Hungarian women were among the best cooks.
Oh, amazing! But so we had cabbage rolled into everything. I mean, and broccoli too as kids. So I mean,
in those days, cabbage was like, what seasonings did these women use? Well, your Hungarian grandmother had more seasonings than my Belarusian grandmother, but still, it was basically salt, pepper, and paprika.
That's it. That's I was going to say. That's it.
And I always like to say, and Eastern European Jews know how to use an onion is another major flavor, and we know how we appreciate it from raw to burned. The full spectrum of onion flavor.
No, but it's
well,
amazing.
cabbage. I always think of cabbage as a winter vegetable, and in fact, we eat an awful lot of it during the winter when there's not many other green things around. And even if cabbage is white, it's still a green thing to me. But the cabbage and potato combination, I think wherever there are potatoes and cabbage, that dish exists. For instance, in Ireland, colcannon. Do you ever have colcannon? Mashed potatoes with cabbage. Very good.
Oh,
very,
yeah.
very good.
Yep.
Especially if you have a lot of butter in there.
Well,
and when I was researching and not just eating around southern Italy, one of my first questions to anybody in a new town that I went to, I would try to find some. Well, it's not hard to find local cooks. You go to the grocery store or the butcher shop, and you start talking to customers. It's not very different than what I do now in Brooklyn. I mean, Brooklyn, as I always say, is a continent. You drive 5 miles and you're in another country, and not even 5 miles, 5 minutes. And so you go to these other countries, and you go to the grocery, and you're going to find somebody, a clerk or a customer, who's going to tell you what the big local dish is. And usually in southern Italy, it's some combination of cabbage and potatoes. Of course, poor people food. And almost never, I shouldn't say that, but poverty was rampant in southern Italy until pretty recently. And if you're going to go find poor people in Italy, you've got to go south.
Oh,
I'm not sure there are any poor people in the north or central regions of Italy.
I think it's a true thing. It's just that my grandmother could make, if you had nothing but sauerkraut and potatoes, and she could make you something that tasted good.
Well, that's another thing. Sauerkraut. I have a big bag of sauerkraut in the refrigerator, Marshall. And the other day I was going to make, I don't know, some combination. I didn't know what. I had to figure it out, of pork ribs and sauerkraut. Now, years ago, I used to make lamb ribs with sauerkraut and beer, some juniper berries in there. But lamb ribs, first, they're very hard to find. I know where to get them, but they're not like, down the street. And I don't know what they do with all those lamb ribs now that I think about it. I go to a restaurant where I eat lamb ribs, Azerbaijani restaurant. As I said, we're a continent. It's 10 minutes away. Anyway, yeah, of course, and then I think about my grandfather's dictum and my bellyache today. I think what did it was, I told you I ate a Cuban sandwich at a Mexican restaurant.
Okay.
But it's a Mexican restaurant that I go to, frequently enough. Usually I go during the week for lunch, and they have a great lunch special, and they make very good chilaquiles. But I don't know what got into me. But the other thing that was suspicious to me is the cheap margaritas. So that was actually one of the big appeals of this place. I really was in the mood yesterday.
Well, how many of those cheap margaritas did you
Well,
have?
I only have two.
Only two, okay.
Actually, I didn't know this. I thought they were $6 a margarita. That's what they are at lunch.
Yeah.
But it was brunch yesterday. So the brunch deal is $20 for this list of entrees, including the Cuban sandwich, and as much as you wanted to drink within an hour.
Okay.
I mean, they're not going to let you sit there all afternoon and drink. But there was a table of young women, 5 women together, and I saw that they had, while I was sitting there, they had 3 rounds.
Wow.
By the way, they were not rowdy or drunk. They were real ladies.
Well, yeah, maybe, you're right. Maybe
that made me suspicious of the drink, because I had one. Normally I just have one.
Well, maybe that's the combination of the drink and what you ate, because you normally wouldn't have that drink with what you ate.
Also, I'm suspicious of the drink itself.
Okay.
What was in it?
Because I myself, here in my own home, in my own kitchen, make myself whiskey sours. Now, if you go to a restaurant and order a whiskey sour, you're going to get a drink that's topped with foam. And the real way, the good way to get that foam is to use egg white. I had just discussed this with my nephew, who's a bartender hobbyist. I don't even know what you call that. A cocktailian? Anyway, so, yeah, he said, it's egg white. He told me what to do. I said, but for myself, I don't need the foam. It's fine. It tastes fine without the foam. And, in fact, if you shake it well, it gets pretty foamy anyway. So this one, these margaritas, had a real full head of foam. And I'm sure it wasn't egg white. It's some additive. I've seen this even in the supermarket. They sell in packets some kind of powder. Maybe it's egg white powder. I don't know what it is. But some kind of powder that you put into the cocktail so that it gets foamy. I'm wondering if I'm not you think it was the alcohol, huh?
No. I mean, I think that's what he thinks, but I don't think that...
Oh, you don't think?
No.
I don't know. Whatever it was, I went to bed without dinner.
Okay. And you're getting up today, and at least you're talking about food.
And I got up today, and I was just tender. Not too tender to have a cup of coffee. So that's good. And now I'm going to have to literally sweat it out here, cook the food that has to get cooked. I don't know what I was thinking yesterday, buying food that I knew was going to have to be prepared in 90-some-odd degree weather.
You were being ambitious. How about that?
I gave into temptation. The sausage have been calling out my name for months now. Still haven't tried them, so today's the day.
I see. Well, obviously that's what you were thinking.
Obviously. So, this is not a good time for cooks.
No, but it will be over soon. It's all I can say about my life. I'm looking at Marshall.
Pardon me?
I said I'm looking at Marshall, who definitely has looks like he got on the wrong end of a fight.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I feel terrible for him.
I look like a squirrel.
Are you in pain?
Yes, but it's manageable
pain.
Did
you take something?
I took what they gave me at the emergency room, which is a great antibiotic, and my Tylenol. There are 3 Tylenol.
The only good thing is that there was no harder stuff around, because that combination would have just been...
Come on to my house, I got a lot of opiates. Because that's what my dentist gave me.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I even said to him, when he gave me this enormous prescription, I said, am I going to be in that much pain that I need all this? And he said, you'll sell it on the street.
No, that's right.
No, but it used to be that
but it's still in my medicine chest, and I haven't taken it.
Right, that's the whole thing. Joe remembers the time, one of my second surgeries, one of the physician's assistants filled in and sent me on my way with a prescription for medication.
No, they mailed it because you guys ran out. It was really hilarious.
And get back up here, and it was for 100. It was for 100 OxyContin.
Because they didn't want to go through that again.
100.
100. I'm surprised that the pharmacist didn't.
I turned it back.
Ring the bell with the pharmacist.
I didn't fill it. We didn't fill it.
Well, you didn't fill it. Well, I you know how the doctors all call in their prescriptions these days. And this was my physician's assistant who did this one, although I think it's supposed to actually be the physician. And instead of ordering me 30 Motrin, she ordered 300 Motrin. And I sent Bob to pick up the prescription. He was picking up other things. And I didn't send him. And he came home, and I said, oh, my God, this is such a heavy bag. What's in here? And I opened it up, and there were these 2 enormous vials of Motrin. Too late, they can't take it back.
No.
That's another drug I'm well stocked with.
That's a lot of Motrin.
Yeah.
That is, if I'm having a very painful arthritis day, 1 Motrin in the morning will set me up for the day, really. So it's a good drug, but not so good to your kidneys. You got to be careful.
Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories are NSAIDs. everything has, let's just call it a consequence, shall we?
You know, I did look recently at a list of anti-inflammatory foods. Well, there's no. I really don't think there's any such thing as an anti-inflammatory food, but there are foods that are inflammatory.
Yes.
And if I had to give all those up, I'm not sure that I would want to live.
And there are foods that definitely exacerbate or encourage, let's say encourage inflammation. And yeah, and it's just it is a constant balancing act. But you're right. It's
no, I had a friend who was wrong about this, but she had a PhD, so she thought she knew everything. She kept claiming that I was killing myself by eating dairy. There is this thought that dairy is no good for you, but I'm not sure about that. I think
balance.
I think we have
really
cows for a reason.
Yeah. You can kill yourself eating just about anything.
But you know, cheese is extremely good for you compared to raw milk. I mean, compared to just whole milk.
Right, and this is not to. The bigger problem is the processing, and the lack. Something happened along the way where people obviously didn't get the. I don't know. Sugar, processed food.
Yogurt is. I'm thinking, what can I have for breakfast? And I'm thinking yogurt might be a good thing. I think yogurt is almost always a good thing.
If you
It was. I was laughing to myself this morning. I've been finding recipes for making your own yogurt at home, as if this was a new discovery that it's easy to make yogurt at home. And one of them actually, at the end of the recipe, said, "Yes, that's all there is to it." Because the dairy cases are so filled with yogurt these days. I guess there are at least one generation, if not more, of people that don't remember that yogurt's super easy to make at home.
I guess I just love. There's a certain thing going on that it's a rediscovery. I was talking to someone last night who lives in Mexico City. He was at a Costco in Mexico City, and it was just a little reminder that life goes on outside of the Beltway. Costco in Mexico City. Picture that, okay?
Why not?
Exactly.
No, and I must say I would be curious to go there because Costco is very receptive to its local communities.
Absolutely.
At my Costco here in I guess what you'd call Sunset Park, they have an enormous kosher department because we have a lot of kosher observers, I'll call them, here in Brooklyn, and particularly at that end of Brooklyn. By the way, this is a bit of trivia. The very first European settlement in Brooklyn was at the very location where the Costco is right now.
Oh,
and I even have pictures of the farm. I'm forgetting the name of the farm, the owner's name, but that's exactly where it was. And now we have Costco.
All right. Well, I want you to cook smart today.
Well, I have to cook the broccoli, I have to cook the sausage, and as soon as I get off the phone, I'm going to do both so I don't have to think about it later.
All right.
Heat up the kitchen later, give it a chance to cool down again.
We will speak to you next week, Arthur.
All right, I will. I will. And Marshall, feel better, and hope that
he has to take
care of you.
He actually has to take some steps.
Yeah. But same to you. You feel better, too.
Okay.
All right.
Take care.
Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, here on Robin Hood Radio, robinhoodradio.com. Underwriting support for Arthur Schwartz.